everyone. This is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy. Be sure to check out our blog and our YouTube channel, on our newsletter, and our great sponsors, Italy Rooting, Phil Italy, and Abitativa Casa. And my guest today from Milan is Ernesto Milani. So welcome, Ernesto. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So you have an interesting past, and if I read your notes correctly, your family migrated from Italy and then some went back. Did I get that right?
Yes, my grandmother returned to Italy.
Okay. And so do you know, well, let me ask it this way. When did they first come to America, your family?
They went to Boston, Dorchester, around 1890. There were two brothers and two sisters, and they settled there. They never returned to Italy, except one uncle. And then in the 19th, two brothers of my father, uncles, went to join their relatives in Dorchester, which is a part of Boston. So now I have a few cousins all around the area, especially in the southern part of Boston.
Yeah, so they came early. They came before the big wave after 1900 then. They were some of the first Italians to come.
Oh, yes. They went there, from what I understand, because I haven't found the exact ships they sailed with, around 1890s, from the birth certificates and so forth, around 1890.
Now, were they from the north or were they from the south of Italy?
No, they were from the north. They were from Gallarate. Gallarate is a town which is very close to Malpensa.
Not a lot of people came from the north, especially back then. Do you know if they had a specific reason for coming to the United States?
Well, there were a lot of people Italian from the north in the States. It's just that, from what I understand, especially at the beginning, it's not known. I could tell you all kind of places in the States where there are people from northern Italy. And since they were very close to Genoa, there were a lot of recruiters around the area. So they just induced, a lot of people go to the States. But this situation regarding northern Italians is, I wouldn't say is wrong. This is the beginning. Until 1915, 10% of the immigrants for northern Italy were from Lombardy, from my area.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. I mean, I do know about the recruiting because I'm friends with Joe Tucciarone, who wrote a great book about that time from, around 1873 to almost 1900, where they had the padrones, going around and bringing people over.
Of course, when we're talking about Lombardy, in Italy, more people in South America, in Brazil, Argentina, but also in the States, I can name all kinds of places where they've been.
Yeah, that's something I learned. Coming from New York, we thought all the Italians came to New York, but I found out that they're all over the United States, and there's so many different enclaves and so many little Italies, which is very interesting, very interesting. Now, how did you wind up back in Italy? Did your family go back at some point in time?
No. But my grandfather always remained in Italy.
Okay, so it was
his brothers,
his brother,
and the brother and sister of my grandmother. On my father's side, my grandfather remained in Italy.
I see. So now, did the families stay in touch? I know back then it was hard because they had to send letters back and forth, but did they stay in touch?
Well, let's put it this way. We have some correspondence and some documents, mainly pictures, maybe photographs regarding the early 1900s. But then I have a lot of correspondence from the other uncles who went to Boston in the hundreds of letters, because they maintained a lot of contact between 1920 and also, I mean, even now we still have some correspondence.
That's fantastic. That's really great. And to have those letters, I found out that my dad's mother stayed in close contact with her family until she passed away, and I think it was 1961 or 1962. And I think my cousin wound up with a lot of letters, and she moved to Florida, and she had them in the garage that probably got wet, and they all just kind of fell apart. It's fantastic to have that. Did those letters have any insight into what life was like in America when they were there?
Some do and some don't. Let's put it this way. It's very hard to understand. Going through them, knowing a little more the life in the United States, well, it's very important because we know what was going on in the States and what was going on in Italy. The only thing is that my relatives in the States were common workers, so they were not involved in, let's say, they were not in. They're not in journalism, or they were just regular people. So the letters are just everyday letters, but there are them hundreds of them.
Yeah, but that's so cool to have letters, everyday letters, as opposed to what you read in the news.
Yes. And I also have the letters that my grandmother sent to the children, to the sons in Boston. So I know exactly what she sent them to them, especially when they had the weddings or some celebrations. So it's interesting. Yes.
You should put them in a book. That would be so great to read.
Well, I have them. I haven't. I know. So many things to put in a book.
That would be so cool to do. I mean, I didn't have anything from here, but when we went there, and again, I didn't know my dad's first cousins were still alive in their 90s. And they had my parents' wedding photo, and my grandmother wrote on the back. But one of the things that I got later that my cousin sent me was, she sent a photo to Italy of herself, and on the back, in Italian, naturally, she was writing to her father, and she said, "To my dear father from your dear daughter, so you never forget." It makes me emotional now because she knew she was never going to see her father.
Yeah, that's the...
Yeah, it's, like I said, it makes me teary. You must get the same feeling when you read those letters. You must get an emotional feeling, yeah?
We'll be right back.
Experience Italy like never before, traveling with a scheduled group or create your own bespoke tour with friends with philitaly.co. Pack your bags and follow Phil. That's www.philitaly.co.
Well, because I have letters also from other people that are not from the family. For instance, a few years ago, there was an auction in New York, and I bought a bundle. And in that bundle, there was a correspondence that the mother had with the son who lived in New York. So that this gentleman used to, when he left from Genoa in 1912. And then there were the letters, the permit. First of all, there was the permit that he had, because he was very young. He was 16 years old. So he had to get a permit from the local authorities to live. And then there are the letters from the mother, that from 1912 till 1920. The mother was just telling the son what was going on in the little town. Was very close to Genoa, by about a few kilometers from Genoa. And everything stops in 1920. But at least I know exactly what was going through in Italy while the son was living in the States. The only problem, I even got in these among these letters, I also found the pictures, and I also found a menu of a restaurant of 1916 at Foy's restaurant on Sorrentino in 1916. The only problem in this case, something that happened, I traced the children and the grandchildren, and the grandchildren were living in one was living in Connecticut, and two others were living in Georgia. And I told them I'm going to publish this, and they say, well, we don't care, just do whatever you want. So this was the sad part of all this situation. The grandchildren were not interested. In many instances, you find people who get a lot of interest. Sometimes it's not the case. This was not the case, and that made me a little bit sad, because I went to the place where the grandfather was born. I traced the house, I traced everything, and there was no interest. So that happens.
Yeah. See, I find that hard to believe, because I would die for some of that stuff. I mean, yeah, but I know, many of my family don't care. I mean, if I find something really significant, but a lot of them, same way, they're just not that interested in it. But that's and there's a woman here. Well, to me, she's a girl, because I'm 73, but she's actually, a woman, and she goes around the country, around this country, or at least in around the Massachusetts area, and she searches for old photos, and she's called the photo angel, and she puts people in touch with their families. She finds the name, she looks for their ancestors and sends them the photos, and it's.
I think I heard that. Yes.
Yes.
I think I read an article about her.
Yes, you probably did. I interviewed her. And that's just her passion. But I think it's more than a passion. There's some force coming from somewhere that told her she has to do this.
Yeah, I don't have to explain that. We are on the same path. I fully understand you.
Yeah, and I was just talking with somebody yesterday about this. What us Americans find amazing is that, for the most part in Italy, people aren't that concerned about the past generations, because they've been there for 200, 300, 500 years. It's and you could probably explain it better than I can. It's, where you come from. We don't. We don't.
It's clear, very clear. I understand.
So one of the things I certainly want to talk to you about is, and something that I just learned about recently, you did a lot of research on some of the Italians working in plantations in the southern part of the United States. What do you know about that? Because that's a really interesting topic.
Well, I sent you a link with the video.
Yes, I saw it. Yeah.
And I'm in that video too. And what's interesting about that is the fact that that was one of my first research. That was in 1976. I had just graduated, and I was interested in Italian micro-settlements in the United States, very small places. I'd gone to Genoa, Wisconsin, which is a place of 200 people, and that's another story. We're not talking about that. When it comes to Sunnyside, the plantation, that was interesting, because there was this gentleman, this professor, Veliconja, and he told me about the Italians in the South. I said, Italians in the South, very strange, in cotton plantations. So I said, well, somehow I ended up in Arkansas. I went to Tontitown, Arkansas. And from Tontitown, then I ended up in Lake Village, Arkansas. So everything started with the interest that some people about making Italians that generally speaking, were peasants, and in the States were just there everywhere, but not in the fields, to settle in the countryside. So there was this movement, that wanted to take away people from the slums in New York and put them in the place that they were coming from. But there was a problem. The problem was very easy, very easy. Italians were accustomed to intensive agriculture. And in the States, there was extensive agriculture. So Italians did not have the money to buy the equipment. And plus, when the Italians arrived in the States, most interesting lands were not available any longer. Then we had another situation, which is the fact that many plantations in the South, and we're talking about, generally speaking, cotton plantation, had been bought by financiers from the North, by the robber barons or tycoons from the North. So one of these people, his name was Austin Corbin, was from New York, and he had, among other things, he had built the Long Island Railway and other things. And he had acquired this plantation, Sunnyside Plantation, was in the southeastern part of Arkansas, just on the tip. And they couldn't find labor, manpower, didn't have manpower. Black people had gone away. They tried with convicts. Convicts were not, in other words, the use of convicts didn't work. And Austin Corbin was a friend of Don Emanuele Ruspoli, was the mayor of Rome. They were friends. So what they decided to do was to sell some lots of Sunnyside to Italian families, send them to the plantation, and eventually those families would be owners of their land in 20 years. And Don Emanuele Ruspoli scanned all over the Marche region around Ancona and Senigallia, where he had some properties. Then some people were recruited through the Scalabrinians in Recoaro Terme, which is in Veneto. And some people were from the Bologna area, more or less from the mountains around Bologna area. So all these families, and we're talking about 600 people, left for Sunnyside in the end of 1895. That was the deal. And automatically, we are talking about the winter. So in the winter, climate was very good. But when summer came, situation changed right away, because they had all kinds of mosquitoes, malaria. Plus, they didn't have artesian wells. So they had to drink the water that came from the Mississippi through filters. So they had all kinds of problems. 10% of the people died. And eventually, Austin Corbin died in 1896 in New Hampshire. When Austin Corbin died, the problem became a big problem, because the heirs didn't care about this project. They were not interested. So they sent a priest, Father Bandini, from New York, and who took care of these people. But after a couple, they had the first group of 500 people, that another group of 500 people come in 1897. But in 1898, everything disbanded. So people were not happy for many other reasons, not only the climate. They were not treated very well by the new company, by the heirs of Austin Corbin. And Father Bandini got a group of these people and went to northwest Arkansas, and he managed through Frisco Railroad Company, to buy a piece of land around Fayetteville, Springdale, in northwest Arkansas, where he built Pontytown, which is still existing today. It's a thriving place. And then some other people went and formed Rosa in Missouri, which is about 2 hours southwest from St. Louis. And some people remained in Sunnyside, mostly the people from the Marche region. So what happened is that eventually, the cotton planters found out that the Italians, after settling on the land for sometime were very able in growing cotton. So all the planters in Mississippi and Arkansas started to recruit through the Italians who had remained at Sunnyside to recruit people in Italy. So they recruited more people from Bologna area, but mainly from the Marche region, also from Lombardy, from the area around Mantova. And those people today, all along the Mississippi, from Memphis all the way down to Natchez, to Vicksburg, and some of them also went to labor at Mount Plantation in Louisiana. Then, they had all kinds of problems because there was what's called peonage. In other words, people were subject to being mistreated. The usual situation in the South. Peonage was rampant all over. Then they had this lady, Mary Grace Quackenboss, that was sent by the American government through the Italian ambassador, Major de Planche, to investigate these plantations. And after that, the immigration to Mississippi and Arkansas was stopped. We're talking about 1912. But people remained there, and after a few generations, Italians managed to buy land. Of course, they sent their children to school and so forth. So things changed completely. This group, we're talking about 3,000-4,000 people that remained on plantations in Mississippi and Arkansas, and today their descendants still live there.
That's amazing. That's really, really amazing. And you mentioned a woman by the name of Rosa. Yeah.
Rosa is Angela is connected with the town of Pugiano. Pugiano is a town very close to Malpensa Airport again. And to give you an idea of how many people, we're talking about 5,000 people that lived at Pugiano from 1880 until 1920. And all these people went places beyond. They were all miners at the beginning. They went far beyond New York. They didn't stay in New York. They went to Detroit, but were not meant to remain in Detroit. They were meant to go to Iron Mountain, Michigan. Then another group went to work in the clay mines of St. Louis, Missouri, and they founded the Hill, the hill that you know, and we'll talk about this too. Then another group, which was very, very important, Herrin, Illinois, working the coal mines. And Herrin today is a sister city with Pugiano. Then other people went to Joliet, Illinois, close to Chicago. Some others went to Stillwater, Minnesota. Few of them, some groups went to Arizona, in Clifton, Morenci, to work in the copper mines. Other people went to Silver Grove in Montana, and others scattered all around. So we're talking about 5,000 people, to the point that in 1911, when they had the census in Pugiano, 5% of the population was born in the States. So it means that 10% of the population had lived somehow, was connected with the States. Then, but we talk in the 70s, I studied at the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis. Probably you heard of a professor, Rudy Vecoli. Well, I was studying with him, and once I was there, I was talking with this guy's name. Guy. Well, is a writer. Now his name is Gary Mormino. Was written the book Immigrants on the Hill. And Gary Mormino told me, well, I have a book about a lady from Pugiano, from Lombardy, And I read, I just read the book, and wow, they changed all the names because they couldn't find the relatives of Rosa. But to make a long story short, this book was about this lady that had left Italy and to go to the States. But to begin with, she was what we call a foundling. She was left on the wheel in Italy. In Milano, at this hospital, Ospedale di Santa Caterina alla Ruota, where mothers put the children that they didn't, they said they didn't want, they couldn't support, and they returned, but was not going back. So in other words, once you left, you turn it didn't come back. And normally the ladies, the mothers or the obstetricians and whoever, they put a signal in it, because the mothers could retrieve the body of the girl within 7 years. 1866, when Rosa was born, 1,000 people, more or less, were left on the wheel. So, the majority were left because the mothers had too many children. They couldn't support them. They did. That's one hospital. The hospital collected the people from different hospitals around Milano. We're talking about Milano, eh? We're talking about Milano. And Rosa was one of these children, one of these babies, that normally the hospital sent to the countryside, because the countryside and one child, the more didn't make a difference. And on top of that, the hospital paid the families. So it was an income. So Rosa was raised in Pugiono, and she got married when she was 17, 18, and eventually she followed her husband to the States. He went to work in the iron mines of Ironton, Missouri. But then she didn't get along well with the husband. So she left the husband and she went to Chicago. And in Chicago, she went to work at the Chicago Commons, which was a welcoming place for not for first arrival, for second arrival people. And she was a cleaning woman, but she was a storyteller. And what happened is that she started to tell stories. At one point, she was even sent to Evanston, to the University of Evanston, to teach people how to tell stories. And eventually she met a social worker, Marie Hall Etz, who basically wrote her autobiography. And what's this autobiography? This autobiography is very simple. Rosa tells the story, of her life in the area around Milan, which, and we're talking about the second half of the 19th century, and that nobody knows about, or knows only, just a little bit. And she tells of her childhood as a girl that went to work in the silk mills. Then she stayed in the silk mills in Pugiono, and eventually she went to work for other silk mills outside of Pugiono, where she stayed in a convent where she was not paid. She had room and board, and she learned how to write and read. And eventually, and she tells what was going on in Pugiono. We're talking about in Lombardy in the second half of the 19th century, as I said. Which is really interesting. It's very interesting that in 2000, this book eventually was translated in 2003. I was part of that translation, and I still present this book around because it's one of the few books that talks about women in the States. Normally, it's all men; it's not women. This is so in 2003. In 2003, P.S. came Pugiano. And they wrote. They eventually they made a video, and Rosa represented the European female immigrant to the States. So this is the entire story about Rosa.
Wow, that's an important story for us to know in America, for sure.
Yeah. And since we're talking about Pugiano, I'll just go on because you probably know about this. Last year we unveiled 4 panels that tell the story of the sport in St. Louis, how the Italians became Americans through sports, and in particular with the panels that depict Yogi Berra, Joe Garagiola, Frank Crespi, and Pisoni, that were the baseball players whose parents and relatives were from the Pugiano area. Yogi Berra was from Malvaglio, which is a little place just from Pugiano. And in 2015, I was in Montclair, Montclair, where there is the museum, the Yogi Berra Museum, and I gave him, on behalf of the city of Pugiano, the honorary citizenship. So I had tried for years to do, and I was very lucky because that happened in May 2015, and Yogi Berra died in 2000 that year in September. On top of that, this year in June, we'll have a group of people from Harran, Illinois, and they will be present when we will unveil the 4 more panels that depict the soccer players from the Hill of St. Louis that were part of the U.S. soccer team in 1950 when the United States beat England in that famous game that was also put on movies, and this film is called The Game of Their Lives. And we're talking about Borghi, Colombo, what's his name, Pariani, Valicenti, Wallace, and Bertani. So this is to give you an idea what's going on in Pugiano.
And I met Yogi Berra once.
Okay.
Growing up, when I was, young boy, 10, 12 years old, he was playing. So I saw him play. And we were living in Florida at the time, and George Steinbrenner when they were in spring training, he made the Yankees go sign baseballs for people. And it was like meeting the Pope for me.
Yeah, that's great. I understand. The same thing with me. When people ask me, who did you meet? Well, I met a lot of people during my life, some important and so forth, but the best was Yogi Berra.
Yeah, he was very, very nice. The interesting thing about that, I think they had to sit there and sign for 2 years. Obviously, Yogi Berra didn't have to do it if he didn't want to. He wanted to, because remember, him and George Steinbrenner didn't get along, and this was shortly after he came back to the Yankees, because he had originally said he was going to have nothing to do with the Yankees anymore because of the disrespect from Steinbrenner. And after 2 hours, everybody left the table. The only 2 who sat and kept signing were Reggie Jackson and Yogi Berra. Yogi sat there until everybody online got their ball signed. But yeah, that's so funny that you felt the same way. It was true. Literally, it was like meeting the Pope. If he had a ring, well, he did wear a ring. I probably should have kissed the World Series. But yeah, I like I said, I saw him play, and there's a great documentary that Billy Crystal did about Yogi Berra. I don't know if you saw it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, that was really a great documentary. One thing about Yogi Berra is he could hit a ball that was around his ankles for a double, a home run. He was the best bad ball hitter you ever saw.
Still in contact with Lindsay Berra, who's the grandchild of Yogi Berra. She's just taking care of many aspects of her grandfather's life. We are still in touch, and she sends books and everything. So it's quite important. The murals in the park. I don't know if I sent it to Bob. Well, I'll send it to you. It's what we'd call a product point. Everybody that comes around goes to the park to see the baseball players. It's probably you've seen this.
Yeah. He was well, he was and he was a very nice man too.
Nice.
He wasn't like some stars, that.
Yeah, no. It's just...
That's really fantastic. Boy, I'd love to interview Lindsay. If you're ever in contact with her, if she wants to talk about Yogi Berra, I'd love that on the podcast.
Oh, do you have her contact?
I don't know her. I don't know anybody. If I'd love to have her on. I appreciate that. And like I said, I mean, I'd like to talk to her about, her Italian heritage and also the Hill, whatever she knows about it. But like I said, I grew up watching him play baseball, and, number 8 is embedded in my brain forever.
Well, Lindsay is just enhancing her father's figure. So it's anything that I sent her a couple of months ago, picture of the house where the parents of Yogi Berra were born in Malvaglio, which this little place close to Cugion.
Well, that's right. He's like my parents. He's first generation. So all my grandparents were born in Italy, and that's why I do this, and that's why I like talking to people like you, is because I'm afraid we're going to lose our heritage here. But to have people on and talk about the stories and get their insight, and I really love when I get somebody from Italy to talk, because it's a whole different perspective for me.
Yeah.
So I have to ask you one more question. Why did you, as a young man, why did you have this need to do this, to explore Italians in America?
A long story, but I'll tell you exactly what happened. I grew up with the letters, and then letters with also with my Uncle Gildo from Boston, coming to Italy every 2 years. So we knew everything about what was going on in our family in the States, or at least in Boston. But again, I was very young. I was interested only as a relative. Then what happened? Then I graduated the University of Milan, and I had a major in Spanish literature and Anglo-American literature. So what happened is that when in Italy, we have to write a thesis. When we have the first 4 years of university, is not like in the States that you write a thesis only for the PhD. You have to write a thesis even before. So I talked with my tutor, a teacher, and she, a professor, and she told me, "Why don't you, to choose an American writer?" I says, "Okay." And at that time, I was very young, and I chose Allen Ginsberg. And the university said, "Allen Ginsberg, well, no." Then I say, "Okay, Allen Ginsberg is no. Let's change. There is this Italian American is named Arturo Giovannitti, who, he is not a real writer. He was an activist. He was an anarchist. But it's could be." I says, "Well, is a minor?" No. He says no. So my tutor teacher told me, "Why don't you write something about immigration to the States?" And I said, "I don't know anything about immigration." And she said, "Well, you have to do one thing. There is this guy, his name is Znaniecki and Thomas, and they've written this nice book about with the letters of the Polish peasants in Chicago." And I says, "Why don't you read these books? There are 2 volumes. You can find them at the library, and then after that, you figure out what to do." So I just read those books. And after that, I says, okay, now I know that this topic is quite interesting, but I did something different. At that point, somehow I got some papers from my uncle in the States. My uncle was president of the Mutual Aid Society in Boston, Subalpina Mutual Aid Society. So I changed everything. I asked for permission, and they told me, well, you can write something not involving literature, but it must be in English. So I said, okay, fine. So I wrote my thesis in English, and the topic was mutual aid societies among Italian immigrants in the United States of America. That was my topic. And from that time on, I maintained my interest towards immigration. Of course, it changed from one town to another. And now, for instance, I'm more involved into genealogy, for instance. But I still do all kinds of stuff regarding immigration. So it's let's put it this way: everything that I do today is somehow connected with immigration and with the topic about immigration. And it started everything with mutual aid societies, and I have 300 badges of mutual aid societies.
Wow, that's something.
Italian, non-Italian, so forth, and pictures and so forth. So it's one of those things.
So what's the earliest mutual aid society that you know of?
Mutual aid society, we're talking about Italy.
Yeah.
Mutual aid societies in Italy, we're talking about 1850. I don't have badges of those, but I have some information. In the States, mutual aid societies started, the ones that I know of. For instance, we had mutual aid societies in St. Louis in 1866.
Wow.
This is about San Ambrose Parish in St. Louis, and there were mutual aid societies in 1886 because at that time the people from the Ligurians from Genoa were all over in the States. In other words, the Genoese were present as commercial persons all over the United States. Okay, this is la società Unione e Fratellanza Italiana that was founded in 1966 in St. Louis. Of course, what happened is that when the people from other places in Italy, like Cugiono, arrived in St. Louis in the 1880s, they had the branches of the Italian mutual aid societies. They belonged in Italy. Just as out of curiosity, while I was just perusing the passengers lists of the people from Cugiono, the ship list, and all of a sudden it says, these people are coming. What's your sponsor? The question was, who's your sponsor in the States? And they say, well, is a big club, 5,200 SCAF, which was Shaw Avenue in St. Louis. And the big club was the Mutual Aid Society. That was the place where everybody went when they arrived in St. Louis. And the society was the one that was helping them find a job or a house and whatever. So it's quite interesting. Yeah, it's very, very interesting. Also,
what I find fascinating about your story is that dissertation or thesis, that kind of set your whole life.
That's right.
It's not an accident, but that's the way things happen, I guess, sometimes. But I find that fascinating. Boy, I wish I could speak Italian 1/10 of the way you speak English. I'm trying to learn. But growing up, they didn't teach us. My parents spoke Italian, of course, to their parents. Actually, they didn't speak Italian. They spoke Parese and Napoletan, but I thought it was Italian growing up. I found out it wasn't really Italian, especially the berets. That's because down south, they chop. So our teacher, I met the teacher at the club here in New Jersey. She's from Trieste, so she's teaching us real Italian. Well, Ernesto, I really appreciate. This has been like so good. I mean, I could talk to you probably for another 5 hours here about this stuff, but I really, really appreciate you taking the time. It's fascinating stories.